Chairman, we have started the meeting. I have to start with item 1 is apologies. We received apologies for absence from the Chairman, Tice Book. I'd also like to inform the committee that unfortunately 2 members are not listed as members of the committee on the front page. This is Jason Groves and James Tunbridge. Jason Groves is on the committee in his role as Deputy Chair of the Police Authority Board, and Mr Tunbridge was appointed by the Policy and Resources Committee. Unfortunately, I think this was missed in some of the handover material, so this records will be updated and their attendance or apologies or attendance online will be noted.
Noted, thank you. James?
Chairman, well, thank you. Ben has just covered most of what I wanted to cover. I just wanted to note that because of that, I didn't get the papers, but I have logged online. I will listen in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and apologies for that.
Chair, can I also check as a subcommittee, would you like members and officers to stand when addressing the subcommittee, or are you happy for...
Quite happy for people to relax and sit down.
Thank you. Item 2 is members' declarations under the Code of Conduct. I'm not aware of any, but now's the chance for members. Not seeing any.
Item 3.
Item 3 is to agree the public minutes and non-public summary of May's meeting.
Any comments? Approved.
Thank you. Item 4 is the Q1 national leads. Oh, sorry. Before we get to item 4, Chair, you might want to ask the
Absolutely,
Deputy Commissioner.
Deputy Commissioner. Maybe a few introductory remarks before we move into item 4.
Thank you. I'm very happy to. Probably most of the things I want to touch on, these sort of remarks, we'll come to in the second part of the meeting when we talk about some of our strategic engagement, particularly around police reform and some of the future direction of travel. So I will hold those comments for a little bit later on. Just for members' awareness, we've got Johnny shadowing us today from the Metropolitan Police, who's shadowing me throughout the course of the day, and then Anna Martin sat to his right, who replaces Alistair Malone as my staff officer. So Anna's come along to see what this is all about, so she can help and support the work of the committee. But as always, it's been a busy quarter. A big focus for us, of course, is making sure that we land later this year report fraud. Alongside making sure that we derive all of the benefits out of those changes, which of course involves lots of work right across the country to make sure that those changes are adopted and embedded at a local level. In fact, in Anna's previous role, she's worked nationally, most recently on the engagement work with all of the ROCUs to assess ROCU capability and delivery and where that interplays with forces, and has been slightly delayed joining us because she's been busy writing the reports for all of those engagement visits and the national summary report, which will then give us some good areas of focus for the next 12 months, as well as supporting the work of the HMIC inspections, which has now begun across the UK to assess how effectively fraud is being delivered by local forces, and of course understanding what the regions do, and the nexus between regional force activity is really important to make sure that forces don't have anywhere to hide and can't blame others outside of their immediate control for failings at a local level. So some really important work that has continued there. Apology to members for the late circulation of the national I think it is the national report. One of the reports came out slightly late, and we have over time, I think in trying to address local performance and national performance, found ourselves with multiple performance reports now, and we will welcome feedback on what is most useful, most easy to digest. Of course, that sat alongside the policing plan performance measures, which of course have been derived from the refresh of the policing plan. So getting to a point where there is as consolidated a version of the performance reporting as possible would feel really useful, but making sure that it's really clear to understand what is about the delivery that we host and do from within our national functions in terms of our operational delivery, and what is about the work that we do to coordinate and enable and support and drive the performance of other bits of the system. I think it's really important that members can see that performance and the differentiation between the two areas of our work really clearly. So I will stand by for feedback on that as we get to the performance reports. Tor and Chris will respectively take us through some of the highlights of those reports, and then allow the rest of the time for questions on anything specific in the data, if that's all right, Chair. So hand over to Tor then. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll start with the local performance pack. We've had a pretty strong quarter on the back of the last 4 quarters being relatively strong. So if we're looking at our 3 cross-cutting strategic objectives on proactively pursue offenders as number 1, we're 44% higher than 23-24 on our disruptions, and we're up 56% on our poker power usage. So you can see that pretty positively year on year for this quarter as well. 513 disruptions against organised crime groups for this last quarter compared to 308 the equivalent quarter the year before, and 39 poker activities compared to 22 the equivalent quarter the year before. So we've set off the year to a really strong start on that. We're down on technological enablers and disruptions around that, but that was because we had a really big whale quarter, the equivalent the year before. And you'll see that a lot in the data. It's very helpful to go quarter by quarter, year by year, but certainly in fraud, the cases take 2+ years, and therefore you can have some absolute boon proactive jobs that really inflate the figures. And there's a couple of other areas I'll call out for that. In terms of then protecting people and businesses, again, we've met all of our Home Office targets in terms of the number of protect engagements and attendees, in terms of up on our social media posts and impressions, and our victim care unit is currently providing a service for nearly 5,000 victims currently, with still some really positive feedback on the level of support that provides. In terms of improving outcomes for victims, and Chris will mainly focus on this from an action fraud perspective, but again, the work that Matt's team has done has really driven the network along with the fraud investigation model, both locally and nationally, to see that improving of the numbers of outcomes. So that's also really pleasing to see those judicial outcomes. I think you can see, though, particularly this quarter, we are down again because we had big whales the quarter a year ago, but we're really confident for 3 big investment fraud cases that we will see come to fruition in the next 3 quarters. We will actually be up over the year by the time we get to April. One area of more concern, coming to one of the last slides in the pack, in terms of our economic crime police headquarters, you can see that we are down significantly on our delegate training levels in the Economic Cybercrime Academy. And you often see this in Q1, but this is now sort of a 2+ year trend. So this is something that Lucy's team are now really looking at, both in terms of the short term to manage the financial risk, of which we're trying to do 3 things. 1, looking at underspent grants that we think can be carried over to us, and we think we'll probably win that argument with the Home Office to do that. Secondly, to start to look, which we often turn down due to capacity, but we are saying more yes to international requests. So we will be doing some training for officers in Mauritius and Nigeria, Southeast Asia. Other jurisdictions are definitely interested in the brand that we have here. And then the third thing, I think, is starting to look with our industry stakeholders about whether there is a more financial industry audience for some of our courses. So the short term is to do some diversification to manage the finances for now. But I think we have got some important work in the next quarter with policing, because that's what the brand is for, is to understand why policing is not coming to us in the way that they have historically. And some of that is the financial pressures, of course, and we are not as cost competitive, partly due to accreditation, and one person's accreditation is someone else's bureaucracy. And we've got to get that balance right and ensure we are pushing forward in terms of modern methods of our training to keep a really solid market share of the policing audience. There also, and we will come back to it more, I suspect, in future, but our refresh of our workforce strategy to really focus on the things that are going to have the biggest impact now we've done a year of pilots will, I think, also help us to see the way forward to remain highly relevant in the policing network. So that's the local pack. The national pack follows pretty similar lines. We are doing well in meeting Home Office targets. Again, probably the only real area, there's a few differences again because of big whales last year or big whales this year. But I think the only other thing to call out is on the cyber training, you can see that we are down. That's a totally separate issue, which comes to the fact that we have always often quite late announcements of our funding bids to then get people in means that we just haven't been able to recruit the trainers for a certain percentage of time. Now we are happy that we will motor for the rest of the year. Let me hand over to Chris for the parts that I haven't covered.
Yeah, thank you, Tor, and good morning, Chair and Committee. So I'll probably just cover both local and national because they both relate to action fraud in the NFIB. So overall performance from last year, our Home Office targets were met across the NEC VCU. Our disseminations and priority allegations and our vulnerable person alerts were all satisfied. In Q1, though, we have seen a bit of a dip. This was anticipated, and that's primarily for 3 reasons. One, we have now set aside a proportion of the team who are focused on readiness for the new service, the new processes, and delivering the new target operating model for FRACIS. We also have some parts of the business extracted for testing during the next 2 quarters, as well as Q1 of this year, as well as then we will be extracting people for training in the new system. Some have been already since November, but there's another tranche due through September through to November in readiness for the live service. So we were anticipating some drops. I think it's fair to say all of them are in tolerance and have been projected that we would have this little dip during this recess. The impact of that, though, has primarily been on the NFIB and our social media work, because those are the teams most affected, and the report covers those dips. But in other parts of the business, contact centre provision and any CVCU level 1 actually are operating really well. We've had a sustained period of improved performance in the contact centre, and those members who have been with us over many years recognise what a challenge the contact centre has been historically. But at the moment, we've got wait times down to 2.7 minutes average. That was around 18 minutes if we go back 12 months ago. And our abandonment rate is now reduced to 18%. And at one point in the last 2 years was up as high as nearly 50%. So a lot of work to improve the current system and service in advance of us passing that over to our new providers. So we're starting to see the fruits of that effort, Chair. But overall, I would say good performance, intolerance, and recognise kind of dips during this period as we transition from one to the other. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the floor, James, and then Jason.
Thank you, Chair. So really good report. And I think on the whole, some really positive trends. Just on the significant uplift in OCG disruption and POCA, I would just be interested to know, get a bit of a comment around that. Is it, pick up one of your phrase, a whale quarter and we're going to see it drop back? Or is there something else going on? I hope it's an upward trend, or maybe it's as a result of you joining the city tour, but be useful just to understand that. The second one for me is, the number of cases overall that we get through the system clearly is constrained by our and others' capacity. It'd be useful to know whether you're sort of tracking sort of length of time of cases sort of through the system, and being quite proactive in terms of whether you continue with a case or indeed drop a case. I've seen that sort of quite a different shift in gear at the Serious Fraud Office, where they're actually very focused on it. It is about taking more risk, but actually the improvement in terms of the bandwidth, I think, is a overall net benefit, and just be interested to see how you think about that. And then just on training, again, I think you're clearly looking at the why we're not getting more people through the academy. And whilst I admire you filling it with some of these sort of overseas courses, there's often a risk that the overseas courses, for some reason, seem to attract more interest going forward. And I don't wish that to sort of suck up time at the risk of domestic training. Thank you.
Are you good to take a handful of questions together, Jason?
Great, thank you, Chair. And just echo James's comments about quality of the deck and positive direction as well. A couple of things for me. So one, and I know I've sort of talked about this before, but it just seems slightly odd that we're looking at Q1 data in the middle of Q3. And I just don't know if could we look at changing the cadence of these meetings? You know, if these meetings were a week or two later, could we be looking at Q2? Because it just seems to me that I would much rather be looking at something that was slightly more recent than end of March. It just seems like a very long time ago. The question, I guess, it's for Chris around the priority allegations that that the ones deemed likely to be solved are actually, well, I mean, it says down 37. I mean, it's down 37 points or 3/4. And I guess the question would be, are we taking the right people off onto fracas if we've got that much of a reduction in allegations being investigated as part of NFIB, and whether we need to look again at that. And it is the I sort of come back to, this is part of the price we pay for the fracas delays. And just on the question on the academy, like James, I completely agree with what James said. It'd be interesting to know. I see that there's been a paper submitted. It'd be interesting to see who the paper has been submitted to. Maybe it's to us, and whether we need to look at our marketing of the courses. Is there something we can be doing to better promote them? Some resource that we can throw in. Talk about them a bit more, about the success, the success that they've been. So, is there a different way that we could be promoting these courses with a bit more resource?
Thank you, Chair. So a few ones from me, if that's all right. If I rattle them off, if I give you the page numbers, I think that might help. So page 15, just a bit of a plea from me. In my world, red means danger and error. So if we can highlight things in a positive colour, I think that would just be helpful. I realise quite a few people have black and white packs, but won't have seen that. Foundry is mentioned, and it's very pleasing to hear. I don't know much about the perimeter of Foundry, what it is and what it isn't, but I know it's the forerunner of if you like, of what's to come. Can we see any quick wins from that? Can we see any positive stories? And if we can we start to push them out? The staff training abstractions has been already covered, but just would like to know when that disruption will normalise. So yes, we know we're going to get disruption, but when would we expect it to stop? And then I would say on page 16, technology disruptions. Tor, you mentioned, the whale point. Is there a view on pipeline though for technology disruptions that we may have some more coming at certain points in the year? So, or is it a permanent diminution because it is very, very low at 2,000? So it's just a slight concern there. Page 18, why are disseminations outstanding for 21-22? So why are these taking so long to clear that backlog? There may be a very good reason. I just didn't know. And I was wondering on page 20, the example where the officer noted 5 linked in reports, sort of 5 linked reports. Is this as a result of sort of, I'm going to call it Foundry because I can't say FRAS, but is it as a result of sort of the new ways of working and better information? Thank you.
I asked you to look at those and then respond to those, and then we've got 3 more questions after that.
Lovely, thank you. So in terms of, let me take some of the pack questions first. The cadence to get to Q1 sooner than Q3. I think that we need to continuously improve the pack. I think a lot of work's been done, and I know often members are not keen on changing the pack all the time because one gets used to the format. But I think we definitely would like to look at that, certainly internally around our own performance accountability regime. The Commissioner and all of the Chief Officer team are kind of re-looking at that. So let me take that away and see if that's an option. And same with the red-green colours. Also, I think consistency on that is essential. So I will also take that away. In terms of the questions around OCGs and pocket increases and the reasons why, we are very lucky to have Matt Bradford here, who leads those teams along with the technological disruption. So I would just ask him to cover those if you're happy to, Matt.
Yeah, no problem. I think it's your point. Sorry, it's your point, James. So certainly in terms of the disruptions and the increase, it's a national picture where we've seen an increase in disruptions. Some of that is due to the system that the NCA own for capturing SOC, so serious organised crime disruptions. That's called APMIS, APMIS. And as we've seen more people roll out and get used to it, there is a cultural shift in order to record more of those disruptions. I think it's filled a gap where judicial outcomes, detections in old money is a helpful unit of currency, because that's what victims would like to see, some justice for the crimes that they report in the fraud space. But clearly we can't lock up everyone. We can't arrest our way out of this issue. So disruptions is something that culturally we have shifted both within the City of London Police and nationally. I was at Heads of ROCU in York during the week. It was a discussion there where we had a really good input. And of course, as numbers go up, there is also a desire for consistency. And as the Deputy Commissioner mentioned earlier, in our engagement with the ROCUs, we've seen some inconsistency. So there is a national project to look at the consistency of those areas. In terms of the technological disruptions, there is a reference in the paper, and I don't know the detail, unfortunately, but there were 3 extraordinary cases which amounted to the huge volumes last year. I'm afraid I can't give any more detail on that in terms of the downward trend, but we have noticed a downward trend over 5 years. That's the beauty of this monitoring, that we are got a grip of it. I can return with more detail should it be requested. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Coming on then, sorry, to the length of time of cases, the dropping of cases, and to the point around age disseminations. I think those are linked. I think it is actually a real success story of COP's leadership in the last 3 years, of how much focus we've done on age disseminations and how much they have come down. There are many fewer cases around like that. There are naturally always some, because they potentially do have real opportunity in them, but the amount of time and bottom of the list for CPS and all of those things means that they do take a long time. I'm pretty happy that we have a good grip on our long ones, but I think often a senior officer look at it all is helpful. So I will make sure I'm really clear on what those are or aren't. I definitely think, and I think the advent of report fraud and what the Foundry platform will do means that the whole network is going to have to make tougher and tougher choices about what they go after and what they don't go after, because the ability to link huge cases now and multiple victims means there will be many more complex cases. And I suspect, and I think this is more widely in policing, you see it a lot in child sexual exploitation, the reactive SIO mindset is not going to cut it as often as a proactive SIO mindset, where you have to say, right, we're going after 4 of these people and we're going to take these 8 strongest victim cases, and the rest we're going to lie on file because we can't process the scale of this. And so I think, as in the way that we've done a good job of implementing the fraud investigation model, I suspect the task of the next 3 years will be to really support a more proactive mindset in fraud SIOs, both within CULP and externally, because that is, as you say, a much higher risk approach, but it means you get turnaround and you get disruption much faster. I think as well, the pivot potentially to not just looking at or not focusing so hard on judicial outcomes, which has always been, the bedrock of policing, and much more about asset seizure, is going to be the way to demonstrate impact over time. So I think that's a big shift that's coming that Foundry will support, but that will really require a lot of work from our leadership to get that right. Let me come to Lucy now on the training point and around the marketing of the courses, and how we might make sure that we stay relevant in the UK policing market rather than taking up all capacity in an international market.
Yes, so we're currently working on a business plan, business strategy, if you like, to looking at short-term solutions. So how we can make sure we get out of the red this year, but then also how we can kind of make sure that our future business plans are fit for purpose, and part of this is looking at the reason why policing isn't booking courses. I think a big part of it is to do with financing and funding. As funding is tight, training's often the first thing that falls off, unfortunately. So how can we bolster that? Can we get some funding from the Home Office that's ring fenced for training? And one of the things that we'll be looking at, we're also working closely with the Home Office around an economic crime profession, of which our academy would be part of, and that's offering those courses out to other public sector partners as part of an accreditation and training route for all for officers and staff working within economic crime. And marketing those courses is a big part of that. So part of that marketing will be through this economic crime profession, but also if we're going to pivot towards a slightly different audience with kind of the financial industry, we know we do get really good feedback when we partner up with some of our financial stakeholders. So it's looking at how we would market that and potentially working with partners like UK Finance, etc., around pushing that out. In relation to the international training, we're actually working with the Home Office on a big piece of work around jurisdictions of risk, and that's working closely with the NCA and the Home Office, where there's a lot of engagement with jurisdictions internationally where we know that there is a lot of fraud and economic crime that's coming out of, and part of that engagement is offering training to their investigators so that they can investigate fraud, and they know the kind of same tactics that we use internally. So certainly the work ongoing with Southeast Asia and Nigeria makes that part of that wider piece of global strategy around looking at kind of that international risk that's coming into the UK.
Thanks, Lucy. I think fundamentally when we do the review on the UK market, we are approximately twice, if not more, expensive than our competitors. And so we have got to make a decision about whether we are going to go down the route of accreditation, but that creates cost and it creates more time abstraction for police forces, or whether we're going to move away from that, move more into, I mean, you can sometimes do both, but move more into a fast throughput, cheaper model that means we can get across more. Because I guess a bit like the armed forces, lots and lots of people in policing move quite often, whether that be promotion, rotation, retirement, etc. So it's a tricky balance. You know, when the Met at the moment are running the numbers and they can get a fraud investigation model course, non-accredited, plus 3 other bits of technological skill to give them licensed software for the same amount of money that they can have the COLP accredited course. So it's just as budgets are tight and things move on, we need to look at what is the value around accreditation, and all from a purist perspective, one feels like it's very high, but in a tough financial climate, it might not be. And we need to decide in which direction we're going, and then what the impact of that is. So that will be, I think, the main point of the review, is to just really deep dive into the evaluation feedback, into the understanding of what's changed, and give us some options in some different directions.
Thank you for this excellent report. My question relates to training. So I think it's wonderful to look at developing those relationships with financial institutions. We only know that issues related to cybercrime and economic crime is only going to get bigger, not smaller, and the complexity is only going to get greater, not lower. The other area which I have brought it to this committee before several times is developing our pipeline of young people coming through and actually having career opportunities within the city police, particularly in cybersecurity and cybercrime. There's a huge hunger amongst young people, you know, across the board. I get it every day as chair of the education board, you know, always looking for opportunities, always looking for apprenticeships, and it's so difficult. And this is where the city police can take a real lead in this by providing opportunities, because it is something where you have the core strength in this area, and there's a real hunger, not just between the City of London Academy Trust schools and whatever, but I think across London and across the country, you know, to be able to pioneer apprenticeship programs in this area so that you can secure your future in terms of your talent pipeline. I think that's really important. For example, the adult skills group, within education, they run cyber boot camps. So this is something which can work really well with the police. This is funded by the LGA. Okay, so we need to have a lot more joint up thinking in terms of the resources that we do have, the funding levels where we can get from the private sector as well as from the state sector as well, but also ensuring that we do have the pipeline. We can create those opportunities for our young people. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo the earlier comments, it's a really good report, so really insightful. Just a couple of observations, actually, because I think you've answered some of the questions, but a point really around training and the technology disruption. Be interested to know how much you're taking into account the changing landscapes around technology and AI and the digital evolution in terms of potentially what this means for these figures moving forward as well. That probably does link into the training aspect as well, up in terms of obviously police forces needing to actually kind of keep up with how the landscape is changing and therefore what needs to be happening. But there's a good response there, Lucy, in terms of what's happening. If you need anything more in terms of further insights, then please reach out to me afterwards. I'm happy to share my experience in that area. Final point, I think on the Q1 versus Q3. If you could clarify that, I was reading this report as Q1 April to June. Therefore, we are in Q2, but I could be wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think Matt's answered some of my questions, but I'll carry on. Very good report, really easy to read. Thank you. The ROCUs, I think we have an acceptance that there are variation in skill set, shall I say, with the ROCUs. And I know there's a report going to see who's going to be up to speed, but the new system will throw out huge numbers of reports to the ROCUs, and they're going to have to try and deal with them. And I know that we can also see from the new system exactly who is dealing with what and at the speed they're dealing with cases and the way they're going to work with them. Now, I wouldn't suggest because I'm not competitive in any sense, a league table, but maybe, we should be thinking about that, because if we're throwing all this good information out and it's not being picked up and it's not being acted upon, what are we going to do about it? That's my first question. The second one, I'm not sure it sits here, but we did talk about it when Lord Hanson came in. We should really have something to show that what fracas is giving us. So it used to take us, Chris, you're going to get me right on this, 24 days to report something because a lot of it had to be manually done, rewritten. It's now taking 24 hours. Let's say I'll just go with those figures. But we should have something here that says the old system used to do this, the new system does this, and this is all leading towards National Lead Force for COLP. And that's a really strong message. We've got lots of really strong messages in here, but we don't have one that says, we're lead force on this, we're lead force for the new action fraud system, and this is what it is giving us, and these are the benefits. And it doesn't necessarily have to be money, but obviously that's a good one to lead with. But it could be with time and how we're reporting things and how quickly we're reporting them and the results. So we've reported things in 24 hours instead of 24 days, and these are, so that's speeded up. So we've now had more convictions, and victims are obviously better looked after and can see results of what we're doing. So I'm not sure if it sits in this pack, but it should sit somewhere. I feel we've put a lot of effort into this, and I think we need to be showing benefits. Just a one slider, nothing complicated. This is what we've got. Thank you very much.
Really great points. Tor, if you want to respond to those, and then I've got 3 more questions and then we'll close up. Just very quickly, Chris, did you want to come in?
Yeah, because I think there's quite a few questions outstanding that's probably for me to answer, Chair, if that's okay. Am I okay to go first, Tor, and then you pick up the last one?
Yes, definitely, please, Chris.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So going back to Jason's point around balancing the workforce and where they prioritise the current service versus the new, and recognising that drop in priority allegations. So it was something we anticipated. Part of this business case and development has been growing the number of staff we have in the NFIB, and that's something we've been steadily recruiting to in the last 9 months. But I think everyone would recognise, in terms of development of the new system, we want our most experienced people on that, because what we're moving from is a pivot from interventions and crime and intelligence staff doing a large proportion of this work to automation and algorithms. So that's why we've had to take our more experienced people, but it is something we look at on a monthly basis. But obviously we're trying to prioritise to ensure from day one of the new service it operates as we anticipate, but we will continue to look at it. Second one, and there's a couple of points, Don and yourself, Chair, spoke about the quick wins and the business benefits of what we've introduced. And this is something we will develop. So we have held off doing it because literally until the end of September, we will know exactly what we've been able to get built for day one, which will determine which benefits and to what level we can introduce from go live of the service. It is part of our launch campaign. It's an important part of the materials that we'll develop to share across law enforcement as more widely. So those will come in October in terms of what those anticipated benefits are, and some benefits we've had to date of the new service. The new service integration as it stands right now has not seen the new system go live for Pursue. No recognising quite a lot of the statistics are in the Pursue and the investigative area. So we will see those start to enhance significantly when we switch on that new functionality from November onwards. So anything to do with disseminations, quality, pace of those going out are a feature to come. They're still in development and testing. So most of our work to date with the new crime and intelligence system has been around intelligence and the disruptions areas, and that's where some of the early benefits have been realised, and happy to bring those back and showcase what they are. And then there was a question around linked reports. So linked reports is clearly a significant piece of work that we do. The one highlighted in the report where we're linked to 5, that is mainly done by our crime review work. It's not quite manual intervention, but it's absolutely not automated. The new system will do all of that work up front and has no limits on linked cases. The current system does. I won't publicly say what that is, but it will see a magnificent jump up in our capability and a lot of work sitting in people's inboxes when they arrive in the morning, instead of them taking 5 to 10 days to develop those linked cases as it stands right now, Chair. I think that covers most of the questions that I had, Chair, and pass back to Tor or for further questions.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Just to cover off the last bits, the tech disruptions in our digital evolution is a great point, and I think what again we'll see over the next 3 years as well. At the moment, we report a lot on our protect engagement, which is a really important area, but fundamentally is the use of a warrant card and also the realities of how quickly or effectively we can get across the entire population. We are going to have to be much more pivoted into stop and block and into designing out as our main methods of protect. And that is exactly what Foundry will support us with, but also the conversations that I think we'll come on to a little bit around O3C, the Online Crime Centre, all the opportunities that that's going to create is absolutely where our investment and focus will need to increasingly be if we're going to stem the fraud increases that we saw in the last year. In terms of young people, another great point. I think there's some good practice in COLP's leadership, for example, the students in the Cyber Resilience Centre programs, and in terms of the pilot that we've done, small, but the pilot around financial investigation, university students trying to get them placements around the network. We often focus across all forces, and that's challenging because there's 43 different HR departments and different vetting rules, and all of that is difficult. But I definitely think it's something that in the review of the Academy, seeing what else we could do would be a good point. You're absolutely right. Q1 is April to June. So when we are not yet in Q3, we're just coming to the end of Q2, but we'll still see what we can do. ROCU performance, I think, this is the performance pack that is key to us because it's the accountability to you all. But the other performance pack that is key is out to ROCUs and forces. And again, there's been lots of evolution of that, but the advent of report fraud will hopefully give a whole nother set of granular detail and data to be able to demonstrate that. And I think some of the work going on as well around our control strategy and what we're asking forces to focus on, we will want to hone our solvability even better so that we've got a pack that's saying, are you doing what you should be doing? But also, are we doing are we setting you up for success in the best possible way? And I think the data will allow us to go to the next step of maturity on both of those things, which will be great. And I think that's everything.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner.
Thanks. Just to sum up, really helpful conversation, a number of things for us to take away. Probably a couple of points I wanted to make, Tor's just made in closing up there about the performance. I won't repeat those. It goes without saying we have to drive the benefits now of report fraud. And my mantra internally is not about, our priority is not turning on report fraud, it's about getting the benefits out of it. And as Chris alluded to, one of the things we're working really hard on in order to get partners on the journey to verbalise report fraud is not just a rebranding of action fraud. In order to get them to sell to all of the kind of constituent parts and the people who are dependent on reporting into it, that it is a fundamental change and there could be some significant impact, we have to absolutely land what you described, Dawn. And Andrew, to your point, we need narrative stories in here that show the impact we're having. We've been in discussions both at ministerial and home office level as well about how that sort of high level dashboard can really help turn the dial, particularly in the tech sector, but also in the telco sector. So reporting up into Joint Fraud Task Force, where all of those big players and their umbrella bodies sit, the volumes of alerts that we are sending out to those sectors, and then what we're seeing in terms of dip sampling, the response to that, the sort of timeline for takedowns across the system, that sort of data is going to be absolutely like gold dust in driving, I think, activity more widely. And so deriving the benefits out of report fraud is our number one priority for this year. And then sort of Matt touched on this around the sort of shift in the focus on disruptions. Really important. We are never going to have the scale of operational investigators to investigate everything we would want. So disrupting organised criminals is maybe not quite as important as getting judicial outcomes for victims, but it's right up there. So it is and will continue to be a priority for us. I'm now in discussions with the MOJ and with CPS to make sure that the new court building, when it goes live, brings much needed capacity into the system, because we've got delays at the moment of between 2 and 3 years to complete financial investigations where we get to the point of actually recovering the assets and permanently keeping the assets from depriving the criminals of their assets permanently. And so there's a whole load of money that we've invested money in financial investigation. They've created a pipeline of huge sums coming back into the system, and that money is not yet being realised because there's delays in the court processes to get that through. So making sure that the courts really do support that will be incredibly important. So working jointly with CPS on that. And then finally, just circling back to the training point, of course, we're all in an environment at the moment where, due to those funding pressures, I suspect we're seeing some of the private sector partners that we're working with seeking to undercut the costs of delivering the courses through CULP. So as part of that review, making sure that where we own the intellectual property rights to courses, particularly on things like the fraud investigation model, which is our national model that policing uses to investigate fraud, that others are not seeking to train people in that without our oversight, because it's ultimately our model they're training in. So there's a number of moving parts in the training world, and because we have a model where we have a very small central training team and then we outsource through our associates the actual delivery of the training to keep the cost down, but it presents some risks and challenges in that. So we will work hard to make sure we get that right. And to your point, James, in the interim, working on those jurisdictions of risk to be really tight on what is it we're offering this year, so we don't create huge future demand for international courses, is something we're also really alive to. So thank you.
Commissioner.
Thank you. Just briefly on the academy, I don't know whether you sort of do whether the courses are sort of mixed in terms of police and private sector together, or whether you run them separately. It just strikes me that if you were to do a sort of combined course for certain modules, may not all be appropriate. The ability to effectively use the private sector payments to cross-subsidise the policing places, and I don't know whether you do that or not, but if not, I'd encourage you.
Yes, thank you. It's absolutely all in the mix. Part of the discussions with the Home Office around us being a big part, if not the leader of the economic crime profession, and potentially that being something we're hosted in the future, would be about those blended courses, partly to drive costs, but also that the ability for us to outsource work or to bring people in from the private sector as well who are already trained and accredited to the right skill set.
Thank you. Three more crisp questions, if I may. So Melissa, James, and then Andrew.
Thank you. Just picking up that training point, is it possible to have two models, one where it was more competitively priced, a sort of quicker route for those forces that are under pressure, budgetary pressure, and another route, which is the more accredited model that could be aimed at more the international or the private sector attendees?
Back on that one. Yes, absolutely. We've already done a significant amount of work to shift a number of the courses online, particularly at that foundation level. As you'll be aware from the work over the last couple of years, what we've been doing is building up new capacity and capability across the network, and that's required quite a lot of investment up front in getting people to a minimum standard. Our ability to then be much more flexible and innovative about how you layer on skills on top of that, and particularly now that we've got to a scale of resourcing across the country where it will be more cost effective for us to go up to Manchester and deliver a course for Manchester, Newcastle, Leeds, Liverpool for people to come together in one of their buildings. The extra space that we'll have in the new police estate, which will reduce cost by us not having to go out to other premises in London to do courses. So that kind of diversification, new and innovative ways of training, absolutely all in the mix. I think you're absolutely right. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be absolutely clear, because I think we've all agreed, but sometimes we agree on things and you never know, if the action happens. So Dawn's point about this, and I think let's be clear, a paper outside, it's not a paper, it's a working document outside of normal reporting, summary of metrics and, as you said, Nick, good news stories that we can all are conversant with and we can use in communication with people to actually start, as you say, to make the quantum step from it's not just action fraud +1, it is actually something completely different, which has real tangible benefits. I mean, I have to say it's a slight shame we don't have it for tomorrow, because it's a sort of conversation that you might be having with colleagues at police committee. So if there is anything that you could give us, a crib sheet, I know I'm not giving you any time at all, but for tomorrow evening, that would be helpful.
Thank you very, very much. Members have clearly come back refreshed after the summer recess, having fully energised. Seeing no more questions on this item. Item 5, time.
Well, just in the absence of it not being an action, should we take an action then, even if it is 2 or 3 short paragraphs that just summarise this is what it is, the impact we're already having? To Chris's point, there's an awful lot that isn't yet fully live, so we're not seeing all of those benefits, but I think we can pull something together that you can read in 30 seconds to at least give you a conversation starter for Tuesday night. Thank you.
Item 5.
Thank you. Members, item 5 is the policing plan performance report for Q1.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose I'll turn to Tor for any other highlights that we want to pull out of this. Of course, we've tried to make sure that we've pulled some of the measures out of both the national and local pack that reinforce the key measures in the policing plan. The challenge for us is making sure, I suppose, that there's not duplication across those, but we've tried to keep something very high level, of course, can be externally visible, that demonstrates what we're doing against the policing plan.
Yeah, I don't think there is anything significant otherwise to pull out. I think there is a question of how many performance packs do we want? Because the same information shown in different ways isn't necessarily hugely time efficient for anybody. And I think, we've got our chief officer team away day on Wednesday saying that we want absolutely everything we do to flow from the policing plan. So it might be a task you want to set us on how we get our current packs into a policing plan format as a high level, and then some subsection slides that means that you are seeing the whole thing in policing plan format, but very much open to your steer on how you want to see this. But I suppose my personal plea would be not 3 separate performance packs.
Thank you. Questions from the floor? Seeing not. Just one quick question from me. So it's great to see that NEC VCU rolled out to 38 forces, up from 6. What is the complete population? What would all forces look like? What would that number be? So very, very close to that already. That's really very, very good.
And again, I think when you think about what does the network value in COLP's leadership, I think the NEVCU is one of those things in terms of really supporting to fill that gap. And I think as Report for All comes online and the opportunities to make those things even more efficient and value for money, and end-to-end cohesive on that victim journey, I think that is a huge good news story for us to be going out to forces and ROCUs about the massive value that Report Fraud is bringing to the network. So whilst it might feel challenging in 2026 for some of the volumes of cases that will start to go through, I think it is really good news on the simplification and standardization of the victim journey for forces. Chris, coming in.
Yeah, and Chair, just wanted to add, I mean, we are in ongoing dialogue with those other forces who aren't utilising us for level 2 service. To be fair, that there is some of them with very mature supply chains and local provisions in place with charitable organisations, and some of them have contracts in place. So there is a continued evolution towards the whole community coming on board with that. Some of it's just timing, and some of it is people wanting to sit back and ensuring what we can offer equals or betters what they've got in terms of their mature delivery locally. And as I say, there is some excellent examples of it that we've taken lessons from as well in development of the national service.
Thank you. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. So just 2 small points, really. So I think we're just talking about disseminations across forces. It references a full results analysis in end of July 25. So I just wanted to know if we were going to see some sort of summary of that, possibly at the next meeting. That's already on page 31. That'd be quite helpful. And then we're looking on page 37, number of complaints. And it strikes me that we need to be looking as a percentage, because as we get more and more reporting, there's a risk here that the complaints are just shooting up. But we do need to see it in context of the overall population.
In terms of the Barton debrief, which was an intensification, I just need to double check. It's run by the National Economic Crime Centre in terms of the debrief. It's an operational debrief. So whether you'd want to see it or not, whether it can be shared or not, but I can check on that.
No, sorry, I don't need to see any operational information. It was just the fact that there was a full results analysis being completed. I just really want to understand the outcomes of if there's anything to be taken from
Understood.
that.
So the Barton outcomes effectively. Yep, we can take an action to get that. And apologies, I then have missed the second point. Sorry.
I appreciate you trying to answer the first point, so saying the second. It was simply to say, I think just representing complaints at the moment, got no, like quantum of complaints, but I think as well a percentage would be useful, because as the population I expect increases, we want to actually understand that.
Yes, I think percentage is more relevant.
Rocketing complaints.
Yeah, I will take that away. Thank you.
Any other questions on this paper? Town Clerk, item 6.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 6 is a summary of action forward public complaints data for Q1.
Thank you. It's the first time that this paper has come to ECCC. Previously used to go to professional standards and integrity. members should be aware that the number of complaints for action fraud are extremely low, and they tend to relate to frustration from complainants that things are not being investigated, which is really not specifically an action fraud issue. If I can.
Thank you, and I'm going to touch and pass over to Detective Superintendent Carly Humphreys and to Chris to walk us through this. As you say, Chair, not previously come here because all of the kind of policing complaints related matters dealt with through a separate committee. But of course, complaints that meet the standard of a police complaint of action fraud or the service received from action fraud is dealt with by our professional standards department. Hence why previously those matters were dealt with in totality in terms of the oversight of PSD. But it does absolutely make sense that we look more holistically at action fraud and then report fraud service and the impact and implications of that. So I'm grateful to Carly for joining today. If I can hand over to you, please, Carly.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair. And yes, Carly Humphreys, Head of PSD. So as stated, it's the first time this paper's come to this committee, but also appreciate that members duplicate other committees as well, so may have seen this report elsewhere. Chair, as stated in those headline comments, these relate to action fraud purely reports. They remain extremely low in comparison to the number of overall action fraud reports at 0.08%. And I appreciate this is the first time the reports come, so there isn't pretty much of a benchmark, but that is fairly consistent. It normally fluctuates between 0.06 and 0.08 each quarter. And also the number of complaints and allegations with those tends to remain at a stable level. However, 0.08% is still not the percentage that we would like. We'd like to improve upon that. And obviously, we've been working really closely with the team around the new system to ensure that the letters predominantly that are going out to victims of crime really explain what the service is about and also how that feeds through in terms of our complaints correspondence, because quite rightly, as stated, most of the complaints, very, very high percentage, are around how they perceive action fraud to be as a service in terms of what those expectations are. So we try to manage that in terms of how we designed it through the new process. Members will also see in the pack the average data contact complainants. That is IPC data, so it just lags a quarter. So at the next committee, you'll see the report for the current quarter. But what I can assure you is from the IPC data, that is below the national average for complaint handling. I'll just pause there because I can see Chris has got his hand up and for any questions as well.
Yeah, thank you, Carly. I just wanted to add a couple of points because I think it will help members before the question. So we have obviously been looking at this complaints data for a significant period, and a majority do relate to two things. One is people not being kept up to date and recognition of what's happened with the report. That's absolutely a key feature of the new service where every reportee will be able to log in and see the progress of their case, and they'll be automatically sent updates across 46 potential trigger points of a journey of a victim coming into the service. At the moment, there's something like 3, so that will significantly strengthen that look. Those trigger points and those reports as well are really quite key, and Carly and others have spent a lot of time in the designs of those different touch points. It's to ensure that when we are making decisions, particularly when we're advising people that we will not be taking forward their case for investigation, we clearly explain our legislation that refers to and what other actions we are taking with the information that provided, as we are far more advanced in what we can do around protect and disrupt as well. For example, although we might not take forward someone for investigation, if they've reported an enabling asset that criminality is used and we disrupt that, we will advise them that thanks to their information, we have taken that asset out of general public consumption and helping repeat victimization to others. So just some examples of what we're doing. There's a lot more going into it, but it's something we are well aware of. The current service and system unfortunately gave us restrictions on what we can do to take forward that response. But complaints, as Carly said, have been fairly consistent in numbers and the reasoning behind those.
Thank you, Chris and Carly. Any questions from members? James?
Sorry, Melissa, I think you might have been before me actually, but do you want to go first?
It's a real quick one. Are there uphold numbers or percentages? Because I mean, people can make loads of complaints, but if none of them are upheld, then it doesn't really reflect badly on the service.
I'll bring Chris or Carly back into answer. Certainly on the ones that I often see getting escalated to me, it comes back to Chris's fundamental point around expectations of the service, and often where the victims are let down is when the cases are then deferred out to or disseminated out to a force, is the quality of service that they've then had through that investigation, how long it's taken, whether or not the outcome was the one they were expecting. And of course, then the complaint comes in to Action Fraud about Action Fraud, when actually it's about local force delivery. So I know there's a lot of work done between Carly's team and other force professional standards departments to make sure that those complaints are investigated in the right place, and that we communicate back to victims often that the substance of the complaint about Action Fraud is not upheld, but that we've referred on elsewhere. I don't know if there's, Carly, if you can comment specifically on the sort of table of data that will be able to reflect what that looks like in summary.
Yeah, thanks. I've just made a note just as a takeaway, because it might be something that we can just pull from the system in terms of numbers that have been upheld, and then a short narrative around on what the rationale is around that. So I can take that away and look at it. We are able to publish that for other complaints. So I think it's just something that we can pull from the system. So we should be able to get that sorted for the next committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I used to work for another complaints body, and that was really the key data point, because, people can make complaints, but if they're unjustified or not upheld, not resolved in a positive way, then it doesn't matter so much.
James.
Thank you. Look, the numbers are quite low. I think at one level they probably don't represent the number of what I call sort of actual complaints that are probably out there, at least based on the number of people who lobby me about things that perhaps haven't happened. But my more serious point, I think, is as we go into the sort of new system, actually, I think the public's perception of whether the new report fraud and how policing is tackling fraud, I think, is going to be really, really important, as well as the various outcomes we're going to hopefully see improve and going to track and measure. And I do just think we should just think about how we capture that, because again, when we're dealing with the narrative, whether it's with in terms of evaluating the success, but also when we're dealing with press, politicians, and others, I think if we can try and think about that, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Sam Clark, item 8.
In which case we move to item 7, which is the innovation and growth update of cyber and economic crime related activities. Melissa.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the committee, I'm here to update on the work that the Innovation and Growth Department has been doing in relation to economic crime and cybersecurity, independently and in collaboration with the City of London Police, since the committee convened in May. In terms of collaboration, we have worked with the Police Authority Board to advocate with our stakeholders for the continuation of City of London's police role as national lead force for fraud. Key examples of this work involved writing a letter on behalf of the policy chairman to Andrew Bailey, Governor of the Central Bank, to discuss the threat to the role of the City of London Police as national lead force. We also have hosted 2 dinners. Well, the Lord Mayor has hosted 2 dinners at Mansion House, the Financial and Professional Services dinner and the Tech dinner, which was last week with attendance of the Secretary of State, Peter Kyle. Well, the former now Secretary of State. But on both dinners, we managed to make a reference or include a reference in the Lord Mayor's speech on the strategic role of the police and we invited members of the Police Authority Board and the City of London Police to both dinners. The senior relationship team of the Innovation and Growth Department has also been working with the Police Authority Board to support stakeholder engagement for the Police Authority Board dinner that is happening this week. So this those are a couple of examples. This is an ongoing exercise, and we'll continue working with the Police Authority Board team to identify new platforms for targeted advocacy as required. Now on projects from the Innovation and Growth Department that are relevant for this committee, we are working on digital verification. This is a project, and just as background, that came from our recommendation from Vision from Economic Growth, and the objective is to increase adoption of digital verification. We hosted a roundtable in July, scaling a digital verification orchestrator in the UK, to discuss the market landscape and preconditions for scaling an effective digital verification service in the UK through the delivery of an orchestrator model. And as next steps, we are in the process of setting up a steer committee and a working group with industry, government and academia to prioritize orchestrator capabilities. We're currently in conversations with potential members, and we expect to launch this work by the steer co and working group by the end of October. And lastly, on anti-money laundering, the Innovation and Growth Department and the Police Authority Board team hosted on March the launch of our report by the Financial Action Task Force, and we are looking to replicate this successful experience by hosting the Financial Action Task Force UK-US banking bilateral meeting that is happening next year. The dates are still to be confirmed, but we're working with the Treasury team to get this happening.
Really exciting to hear about the work, especially around the orchestration layer. Really keen to understand how that's been juxtaposed with the various government departments that sort of now starts to turbocharge digital verification. Clearly, that's become more of a national priority, especially in terms of immigration and the main that's driving the fundamental conversation. But obviously, it has significant impact into another sort of civil society. Sorry.
Look, just echo your positive comments, and thank you for all the work that's been done on digital verification. I mean, for me, it's going to happen. It is happening. It's just how and how far. And I just think we should be looking at opportunities to further lean into that. And I think next to the chief exec of Yoti, who's seen his business sort of go through the roof, really on the back of the Online Safety Act, but sort of age verification and things for online platforms. But it's clearly much more than that, and links into the sort of clever technology that the banking industry are using. My question really was really around, particularly now we've got a new name for the committee, Police Authority Director, that talks about economic security. Where I'm going on that is, with the increasing number of very significant and high-profile sort of cyber attacks, M&S, Jaguar Land Rover, and others, there is a very, very real cost to companies, our economy, and all of that. And I just wonder whether there is a piece that we might wish to lean into, this is more for corporation, innovation and growth, around really understanding that. And do we understand that impact on city businesses? Because as ever, I think often these costs don't often get talked about or somewhat buried. And I just think wearing the corporation hat, we may be able to understand that problem in a way that others can't. So I'm just going to put that out there. I'll put it on my agenda for Damien, but I think it's a good one for us to be thinking about. Economic security. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. I'll take that one away.
Thank you. Any other questions or observations? Item 8, questions of matters relating to the work of this committee. I'm not aware of any. Any other business that the chairman considers urgent? Item 9. I think Ollie is going to give us an update on the security minister.
Chair and members, just to sort of update following the reshuffle over the weekend, just to recap, Shabana Mahmood has replaced Yvette Cooper as Home Secretary. Sarah Jones and Alex Norris being brought in for immigration and policing, although we haven't had confirmation of which portfolio each of them will be taking forward. I would like members to note that they're not cold contacts. Sarah Jones visited the City of London Police in September 2023, and the Commissioner and I met with Alex Norris when he was Shadow Policing Minister in February 2024. So we look to picking up those engagements looking ahead. Dan Jarvis, as members may have seen, remains Security Minister, but with an added portfolio of Minister of State for the Cabinet Office. Again, yet to receive public details precisely on the details of that portfolio. And Lord Hampson remains the Minister covering fraud. So I just thought it worth members hearing that update.
Thank you, Ollie. Town Clerk, item 10.
Okay, item 10 is the exclusion of the public, and members are content to exclude the public for the remainder of the meeting. If you'll bear with me while I stop recording.